Helen couldn't sleep that night. The rain drummed endlessly against her window, whispering fragments of a story that refused to fade. The thought of the old man outside the museum, his quiet persistence, his trembling hands, had lodged itself deep in her mind. At dawn, she returned to the museum, the sky heavy with gray. The marble steps were slick with water. She expected the stairs to be empty, yet something shimmered faintly on the stone. She knelt, brushing her fingers over the surface. There, a faint sketch, half erased by rain. A woman's outline, the trace of blue eyes. Helen followed the lines until she found something small tucked beneath the stairs, a rusted metal box. Inside lay a folded letter, a key, and a pencil worn down to its wood. The paper was warped and fragile, but the words were still legible. They display my work without my name. They hang my silence inside their walls, but the rain remembers. A L. Her breath caught. He wasn't just a drifter. He was Arthur Leclair. She rushed to the archives again, the key clutched in her hand. Hours passed as she searched through storage rooms filled with forgotten art. Finally, deep in the basement, she found a small wooden cabinet sealed with a lock that matched the key. It opened with a slow metallic sigh. Inside lay a box wrapped in cloth, covered in dust. She unwrapped it and the air seemed to grow heavier. Inside, dozens of sketches, each dated decades apart. Portraits of women, eyes filled with light, signed with the same initials, A.L., and on one yellowed page, a self-portrait. The man from the steps. Helen stared at the drawing, her throat tightening. The face was marked by scars, but the eyes were unmistakable. It was him. He had survived the fire. He had lived among his stolen art, unseen, unacknowledged, for half a century. Thunder rolled above the building. She turned another page. It showed the museum itself, sketched from the outside, each window perfectly drawn. And beneath it, in faint handwriting, my prison, my gallery, my home. Helen pressed a trembling hand over her mouth. The sound of rain grew louder, echoing through the corridors. Then she heard footsteps. She turned. At the far end of the hall, framed by the flickering light, stood the old man. His coat dripped onto the concrete. His face was half in shadow. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Only the steady sound of water filled the space between them. Finally, Helen whispered, "Arthur?" The man lowered his gaze. His voice was soft, worn by time. "You shouldn't have opened that box." Helen stepped closer, her heart racing. "You were the one who left the key." He smiled faintly. "Because I knew someone would listen one day." She looked around at the drawings. "These are yours. You painted half the collection in this museum, didn't you?" Arthur nodded slowly. "I did. But they took them when I was gone. They erased my name. When I came back, there was nothing left, just their stories built on my silence." He walked past her and...
The museum stood in silence at the heart of the city, its marble walls glimmering beneath the soft hum of streetlights. By day it was alive, the shuffle of visitors, the whispers of guides, the echo of history. But when night fell and the rain began to sing, the building turned into a cathedral of ghosts. And then he came. Every night, without fail. An old man wrapped in a torn coat, shoes soaked, a leather pouch at his side. He would sit on the lowest step, unfold a piece of paper, and begin to draw. His hands moved with purpose, sketching lines that seemed to remember something his mind had long forgotten. No one asked who he was. To the guards, he was a harmless stranger. To the city, he was invisible. Every morning, the janitors washed the stairs, and the rain carried his drawings away, faces, eyes, stories erased before anyone could see them. Yet every sketch shared one strange detail, a pair of blue eyes that seemed almost alive. Paul, the night guard, saw him often. Sometimes he waved. Sometimes he pretended not to notice. But one stormy night, lightning flashed across the sky and Paul's flashlight caught something on the stairs. A single perfect eye drawn on wet stone shining like glass. Water rolled through the lines as if the drawing itself was crying. Paul froze. The old man was still there, kneeling in the rain, his coat clinging to his thin shoulders. He looked up only once, and for that brief second Paul felt something unsettling, a sense that he had seen that eye before. The next morning, Paul couldn't shake the image. When he passed through the museum's main hall, his gaze stopped on a painting, The Blue Eye by Arthur Leclair. The same emotion, the same shade of blue. It was impossible. But it was the same Arthur Leclair, a name buried in art history. A painter whose studio burned decades ago, whose body was never found. Half his works destroyed, his legacy forgotten. That night, Paul returned to the entrance. The man was there again, sketching under the storm. Paul stayed inside, watching through the glass. The rain washed over the marble, the old man's hands trembling yet steady. When Paul finally stepped outside, he saw a woman's portrait stretched across the stairs, her hair swirling, her eyes impossibly blue. He knew her face. He had seen her before, in another of Leclerc's lost works, The Muse in the Fire. When he looked up again, thunder cracked. The man was gone. Only the rain remained. The next morning, Paul showed the curator, Helen Ward, a soaked sheet of paper he had found near the steps. A sketch of the same woman, and faint initials at the bottom, A.L. Helen went silent. Then, late that evening, she descended into the museum's archives. Dust filled the air as she opened a forgotten file marked Leclair Arthur. Inside were photographs of a young artist, sharp eyes, gentle smile, and newspaper reports from 1974. Studio fire claims painter's life. But one note caught her eye, scribbled in pencil, faded by time. Survivor found at Bellevue Hospital. Identity unconfirmed next to it, the same initials, A.L. Helen stared at the note for a long moment. The rain outside grew louder, tapping on the window like impatient fingers. She whispered to herself, "He's still alive."
The next morning, the city awoke beneath a restless sky. Thunder rolled like a slow drum beat over the museum, and every street shimmered with the reflection of rain. Helen arrived early, clutching Arthur's sketch beneath her coat. The word tomorrow still echoed in her head, an unfinished promise she didn't understand. Inside, the museum was quiet. The guards hadn't seen the old man again. The marble steps were spotless, the traces of last night's storm washed away. Yet something felt different, an invisible tension in the air, as if the building itself were waiting for something. Helen climbed the staircase to the main hall. The lights flickered. Water dripped through the ceiling, tracing slow rivers down the walls. Then she saw it. Across the largest marble panel, drawn in black charcoal, was a new sketch. Fresh, bold, impossibly detailed. It covered half the wall, a portrait of the museum itself, seen through the rain, its windows glowing like eyes. Beneath it, in neat handwriting, one line read, "For those who finally looked." Helen's pulse quickened. She called for Paul, but he was already coming down the corridor, flashlight in hand. "It appeared overnight," he said, voice trembling. "No alarms, no cameras caught anything." They stared at the drawing. The detail was flawless, the brushwork exact, alive. Every stroke seemed deliberate. like the final confession of someone who knew the end was near. Then Helen noticed something small at the corner of the image, a signature. Arthur Leclair, 2024. She whispered, "He came back." Paul turned toward the entrance. "We should check outside." The rain had eased into a light drizzle. The air smelled of stone and smoke. At the foot of the steps lay Arthur's coat, folded neatly, his leather pouch resting beside it. Inside were pencils, bits of charcoal, and a single note written on damp paper. "The storm is over. My name belongs here again." No one ever saw him after that day. Weeks passed. The museum restored the wall, preserving the charcoal mural behind glass. News spread quickly. The return of Arthur Leclair. Visitors flooded the halls, whispering his name with reverence. Helen curated the new exhibition herself. At the center stood the recovered sketches from the basement, each framed in gold leaf. Above the entrance hung a single banner, "The Rain and the Muse, the lost works of Arthur Leclair." People came to see the art, but they stayed for the silence, the kind that felt sacred, as if the walls still remembered the man who had drawn in the rain for 50 years. Children pressed their hands to the glass, staring at the blue eyes that seemed to follow them. Some said they could hear faint drops of water whenever they stood too close, like the echo of a storm that never ended. Helen often stayed late after closing, sitting beneath the mural. The light from the exit sign flickered softly across the floor. Sometimes, when rain began to fall outside, she thought she saw a reflection move within the glass, an outline of a man, bending slightly, drawing again. She would smile and whisper, "Good night, Arthur." And the rain would answer, tapping gently on the windows, as if in reply. That winter, the museum installed a small plaque on the outer steps. It read, "Arthur Leclair, artist, dreamer, the man who painted the rain. Every masterpiece begins with a whisper." Passers-by slowed when they saw it. Some left flowers. Some only paused for a moment, lost in thought. And though no one ever saw the old man again, the marble always seemed to glisten a little brighter after every storm. Because maybe, somewhere in the rhythm of falling rain, the world still carried his voice, quiet, patient, and eternal.